From modest beginnings as a newspaper delivery boy to becoming the richest man in the world. From a child with an entrepreneurial spirit to the owner of dozens of businesses and one of the most respected businessmen in the world. This is the story of the Oracle of Omaha and the greatest investor of all time, Warren Buffett. In 1929, the United States entered the worst economic crisis in its history. Images of people lining up for free food, jumping off buildings because they had lost everything, and the bankruptcy of thousands of companies that left millions unemployed marked a generation that, despite living in prosperous years decades later, never forgot the harsh crisis they were able to overcome. And in 1930, Warren Buffett was born. Growing up in this crisis and witnessing how the country was able to withstand adversity, he began to form one of the key ideas of his life from a very early age, which he still applies to his investments over 90 years later: never bet against the United States. The second child of Layla and Howard Buffett, Warren Buffett grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, a small city in the central state of the United States. Howard Buffett worked as a stockbroker but lost his job in 1931 due to the Great Depression. He decided to start his own investment firm, an extremely risky move in such a difficult time, but it was enough to provide for his family.
My dad had various nicknames for me. He'd call me Fireball sometimes because I'd start little businesses. He didn't care about money at all. He believed very much in having an inner scorecard and never worry about what other people are thinking about you. Just if you know why you're doing what you're doing, that's good enough. I admired everything about him to the extent that I was absorbing lessons from him without knowing it. And the idea that all lives have equal value is something that all three of his children felt since I can remember.
And one doesn't have to look far to understand why Warren Buffett would develop a deep passion for the stock market. For Warren, his father was the person he admired the most in his life, and there was always a strong bond between them. From a very young age, Warren Buffett would become one of the most powerful compound interest machines ever seen in the stock market. Compound interest is the effect that allows for returns on returns, generating an exponential effect. And what might have been just a few cents in his childhood, thanks to the jobs and ventures Warren Buffett undertook, now amount to billions of dollars several decades later. Because from a very young age, Warren would engage in ventures and jobs from which he would learn immensely, and later in his life, they would serve as inspiration for many of his most successful investments. One such example is his sale of Coca-Cola. Warren Buffett would buy packs of Coca-Cola at his grandfather's store and sell them individually door to door. Perhaps, even with the high ambitions he had as a child, he couldn't have imagined that one day he would become the largest shareholder of this company.
My grandfather had a grocery store, and I used to buy Coca-Cola from him in 6-packs for $0.25 and sell them for $0.05 each. I sold the Saturday Evening Post door to door. I sold Ladies Home Journal. I had all kinds of little ventures, not all hugely successful, I might add. I liked doing business early on.
Warren also worked for his grandfather at the same store, where he learned the importance of hard and honest work. However, he also realized that it would be much better for him to be his own boss rather than an employee. This was something he confirmed years later as a newspaper delivery boy, as he had the freedom to choose how to work and design his routes, with no boss bothering him. And this work helped him develop a strong interest in journalism and newspapers as a business, something that he was later able to take advantage of in profitable investments in these media. And while it was a business that went downhill, it wasn't until long after Warren would have been able to make a big profit out of it. Before the internet changed everything, newspapers were businesses that required very little reinvestment and generated a significant amount of cash flow, which could be used in other ventures. They were cash-generating machines that established their presence in a territory and secured the loyalty of their readers to stay informed about everything happening in their community. And although Warren stopped delivering newspapers and investing in them, he continues to read around 5 newspapers daily. He combines this with constant reading of annual reports from companies to understand, from a micro level, how the economy is evolving, beyond indicators such as unemployment or production, which may be telling a story in low resolution.
I just read and read and read. I probably read 5 to 6 hours a day. I don't read as fast now as when I was younger, but I read 5 daily newspapers. I read a fair number of magazines. I read 10Ks. I read annual reports, and I read a lot of other things too. So I've always enjoyed reading. I love reading biographies, for example.
In 1941, Warren bought his first stock and reinforced an important lesson: never bet against the United States. That year was marked by a series of defeats for the Allies in World War II, making the idea of investing in the stock market seem like complete madness. But having learned that lesson at such a young age and having witnessed the country's ability to overcome challenges, solidified his confidence that despite difficulties and a turbulent path, the future of the United States would remain promising. That's why, regardless of the crisis, Warren has always been someone who remains calm in the face of the situation, no matter how serious it may seem. In 1942, Warren Buffett's father was elected as a congressman, and the family moved to Washington. This event noticeably affected Warren, who didn't want to leave Omaha, and it was reflected in his grades and interests. He went from being an outstanding student to a headache for his teachers due to his constant pranks. This act of rebellion led him to run away from home and be apprehended by a police patrol. However, his father's intervention, expressing his disappointment with Warren's behavior, was enough for Warren to straighten his path, as he did on several occasions. His father's influence was evident again in 1947 when Warren finished high school and wanted to fully dedicate himself to business. However, his father convinced him to continue his studies. His father's influence was so strong that Warren not only graduated from college but also pursued a master's degree at Columbia University. This decision would change the course of his life because it was at Columbia University where he would meet Benjamin Graham. Benjamin Graham is the father of fundamental analysis and was known as the Dean of Wall Street. Graham developed an investment style called value investing, which is still relevant today, nearly 100 years later. Value investing is about looking at stocks not as tickets on a screen or newspaper, but as parts of a company. That when it is sold at a discount in the market, meaning its price is lower than its intrinsic value, it represents a good opportunity to buy its shares. While stocks should be seen as parts of a business, it should be understood that being traded on the stock market, they can experience sharp price changes that do not necessarily reflect intrinsic changes in the business, but rather the market's emotions. Graham understood that the market's emotions, in other words, the collective behavior of its participants, was like a pendulum, swinging from extreme pessimism to extreme optimism. Skillful investors must learn to take advantage of moments of pessimism and low prices while ignoring the crowd during periods of optimism and high prices. Graham, an investor shaped by the Great Depression, was also characterized by his highly conservative style, only buying companies with a significant margin of safety. The margin of safety of a stock is the difference between its price and its intrinsic value. The greater this difference, the safer the investment in that stock. Although this concept remains highly relevant, the market has evolved and become more efficient, causing excessively cheap companies that can be bought with a high margin of safety to be scarce. However, the idea of never overpaying for an investment because such behavior, if repeated enough, will generate mediocre or even negative returns, still holds true and is frequently mentioned by Warren Buffett. Graham's teachings, condensed in the books The Intelligent Investor and Security Analysis, shaped Warren Buffett's investment style. Buffett had read practically every investment book written up to that point, including those on charting and technical analysis, but felt they had little influence on him. Having the opportunity to know Graham and study under him filled Buffett with satisfaction and undoubtedly left a profound impression on Graham as well. Buffett was one of Graham's most outstanding students and later became his employee and friend.
I've had some lucky days in my life, but one of the luckiest was in 19 49 when I was 19 years old in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I picked up a copy of The Intelligent Investor. It not only changed my investment philosophy, it really changed my whole life. I'd be a different person in a different place if I hadn't have first seen that book. I got a bedrock of investment philosophy that really hasn't changed ever since I read the book. I may embellish on it a little here and there, but it was Ben's ideas that sent me down the right path.
Once he completed his master's degree, Warren Buffett offered to work for Graham for free. However, Graham comically responded that Buffett was overestimating himself. Later on, Buffett would understand that the reason Graham initially didn't hire him was because he wasn't Jewish, and Graham only hired Jews as a way to compensate for the marginalized status of the Jewish community in the world of finance at that moment. Buffett then decided to work with his father at Buffett Falk as a broker from 1951 to 1954. Eventually, he was able to convince Graham to hire him at Graham Newman, where he worked for 2 years before deciding to create his own firm, Buffett Partnership. In this firm, Warren put in all the money he had accumulated up to that point, as well as funds from family members and friends whom he persuaded to invest with him. They would not regret it because in its first 5 years, the partnership generated a cumulative return of 250% compared to the 74% of the Dow Jones. Warren Buffett applied what he had learned from Graham in a particular strategy he called Cigar Butts, where he sought out deeply undervalued companies that still held some residual value that he could acquire practically for free. It's like smoking the last puffs of discarded cigarette butts that you find on the street, not very elegant, but you can smoke for free if you pick them up and take advantage of those last drags. Many of these companies were known for being mediocre businesses on the verge of bankruptcy. However, the cash, inventory, investments, or what would remain if their debts were settled would be enough to cover the investment and generate profits. Thus, they hit a value that allowed Buffett to buy dollars with cents.
The cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts and you find this on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. Disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses.
During this period, at the beginning of his career, Warren Buffett realized a major liability that weighed on his shoulders, a fear of public speaking. Warren understood how important it was to be able to communicate effectively, and determined to change his poor communication skills, he enrolled in Dale Carnegie's school, famous author of the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. His certificate from the school, which is the only one he keeps in his office, fills him with pride. One of the reasons for this could very well be that as part of an activity at this school, Warren Buffett proposed to the love of his life and mother of his children, Susan Thompson. Susan Thompson was born in Omaha in 1932. She was a significant counterbalance to Warren, who had been raised in a conservative household with a Republican father and had dedicated most of his life to studying and business. Susan's father was a church minister, psychologist, and dean of the University of Nebraska. This made him get along very well with Warren from the very beginning, who, despite his age, was extremely intelligent and had great knowledge. And it was precisely him who motivated Susan to give Warren a chance. Susan was a lover of art and a promoter of civil rights and women's rights. She influenced Warren Buffett to become a Democrat, perhaps the most marked difference he has had with his father, and to finance political campaigns and make donations to sometimes controversial causes such as Planned Parenthood, an organization that provides reproductive health services including abortion, and also to promote causes such as increasing taxes on the wealthy. The couple, who had 3 children, had a plan for Susan to donate their entire fortune through the Buffett Foundation once Warren passed away. However, tragedy struck in 2004 during Susan's recovery from throat cancer surgery when she suffered a stroke, ultimately ending her life. This was perhaps the most devastating blow Warren Buffett has faced in his life.
Susie really put me together. She believed in me. She put me together, and well, not only turned out to be the person I've turned out to be, but I actually wouldn't have been as successful in business without that. She made me more of a whole person.
In 1959, Warren Buffett would meet the person who would become his partner and arguably his greatest influence alongside his father and Benjamin Graham, Charlie Munger. Charlie was born and raised in Omaha, just a few houses away from Warren, and he worked at Warren's grandfather's store when he was young, but they had never crossed paths. Like Warren, Charlie was an avid reader and typically the smartest person in the room. Charlie had studied meteorology at Caltech and served in the military during World War II. Afterward, he studied law at Harvard and was dedicated to working at his own law firm when he met Warren at a gathering of mutual friends in Omaha. The chemistry between the two was so strong that they talked for hours, completely ignoring the other guests. Warren encouraged Charlie to start investing, since for someone as intelligent as him, it was a place where he could make a great deal of money.
Charlie Munger actually grew up a half a block from where I live. He worked at my grandfather's grocery store, as did I, but he was 6 years older and I never knew him at all in Omaha. And then through a mutual friend, we got introduced. In about 10 minutes, I knew that this guy and I were going to do a lot of things together over the years.
Charlie had already realized that his profession would not bring him the kind of wealth he aspired to, so he took Warren's advice, and a couple of years later, he opened his own investment firm. Charlie and Warren stayed in touch and participated in multiple investments in different companies. This friendship also yielded great benefits for Warren because Charlie positively influenced his investment style. He made Warren see that investing in wonderful companies, even if they didn't have a significant discount, was much better than investing in mediocre companies at low prices. He also pointed out that Warren's cigarette butt strategy, although profitable, was not easily scalable and would eventually become less useful. And while Charlie has always claimed that he shouldn't be praised for causing this change in Warren, since he would have come to that conclusion eventually anyway, it's clear that Warren wouldn't be the person he is today without Charlie's help.
What it was like when you first met Warren?
Well, I thought he was a prodigy. And I got a lot of criticism. My wife said, "Why are you paying such enormous respect to that young man with a crew cut who won't eat vegetables?"
In 1965, Warren started buying a declining textile company called Berkshire Hathaway. This textile business was part of his cigarette butt strategy, and Warren saw a good opportunity to make profits if the company started divesting the money it was generating and closing its losing operations for the benefit of investors. Although Warren Buffett's plan, as in other instances, was to exit the investment when the price reacted to the company's value or when the company was liquidated and the remaining assets were distributed to the owners, a misunderstanding with the managers triggered Warren's fury. In an act he acknowledges as childish and foolish on his part, he bought more shares of the company to be able to fire the management. Once in control of Berkshire, Warren found himself leading a business destined to fail. However, determined not to lose his investment, he began using the remaining money in Berkshire to acquire other businesses. Gradually, this company ceased to be a textile business, closing its last operations in this sector in 1985, and became an investment vehicle that Warren Buffett continues to use to this day. Some of the first businesses that Warren acquired through Berkshire were insurers. He realized that insurers had float, which is money held to pay claims made by policyholders. Warren realized that this money remained stagnant for a long time, and the portion that went out was equivalent to the portion coming in. This meant that he could use a significant percentage of the accumulated money for investments at an almost zero cost. That's how Warren began leveraging with the float money, without worrying about interest and always keeping enough in reserves for a catastrophic event. This process allowed him to noticeably accelerate the effect of compound interest. Today, Berkshire partially or wholly owns insurers such as Geico, National Indemnity Company, Berkshire Hathaway Specialty Insurance, Allstate Corp., Progressive Corp., Jefferies Financial Group Inc., among many others. Warren has always been attracted to companies with moats. This term, derived from the moats built around castles as a form of protection, refers to a company's brand recognition and competitive advantage. Warren had first-hand experience with this concept through dozens of brands like Coca-Cola, Gillette, Disney, Heinz, The Washington Post, Walmart, and others, which had stood the test of time and become part of American culture and sometimes even global culture. A company with a moat can increase the price of its products and still retain its customers, survive changes in technology, and adapt to shifts in consumer trends. With this idea in mind, Berkshire Hathaway acquired See's Candy in 1972. See's Candy is a company founded by Charles See and his wife Florence in Los Angeles in 1921 and is highly recognized on the West Coast of the United States. Warren could see that this company had the ability to generate a significant amount of cash and required minimal reinvestment, allowing him to withdraw the cash and invest it in other businesses without sacrificing the company's growth. Despite being purchased for only $25 million and requiring minimal reinvestment, See's Candy currently generates over $400 million in annual revenue. This characteristic of See's Candy, which was also evident in other businesses like newspapers, has been a constant in Warren Buffett's investment style. He has been attracted to businesses that generate a substantial amount of cash and require little capital for reinvestment, allowing them to reward their owners with dividends and share buybacks. One such business was the Washington Post, which in 1973 faced significant pressure from Richard Nixon, providing Warren Buffett with the opportunity to acquire a significant portion of the company at a low price. It was through this purchase that he met Katharine Graham, the director of the newspaper, and developed a strong friendship with her. He also supported her in leading this influential media outlet, which a year later would uncover the biggest political scandal in U.S. history, Watergate.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body.
His relationship with Katharine Graham led Warren Buffett to move in social circles he was not accustomed to, and he became known to politicians, businessmen, and celebrities. Warren remained a member of the company's board of directors until 2011 and maintained his position until 2014 when Jeff Bezos acquired the company. In 1974, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger experienced one of the most stressful episodes of their lives when they made a purchase of Wesco, a bank in California that was about to be acquired by another bank that, upon discovering this, filed a complaint, which triggered an investigation by the SEC. Warren raised alarms at the SEC due to the complex web of investments he had formed through his various companies, his personal portfolio, Berkshire's portfolio, and Charlie Munger's portfolio.
We had drifted in since we had several companies, so the whole thing looked like so much spaghetti that had been done for some evil master purpose.
Anytime you find that things are so wired that they take a long time to be able to understand them, that types of activity like that raises a suspicion that maybe somebody is doing that to get away with something.
This led the SEC to view Warren as highly suspicious of potentially engaging in wrongdoing. However, thanks to his reputation, Warren managed to avoid any charges and only had to pay a fine of $100,000. Nevertheless, he learned an important lesson regarding the significance of reputation and the need to be more cautious in such dealings. Unfortunately for Warren, this would not be the last episode of its kind he would encounter. In 1987, Warren Buffett made an unusual decision at the time and purchased a 12% stake in Salomon Brothers, one of the most iconic investment banks on Wall Street, a place for which Warren had never shown much appreciation due to its values being in clear opposition to his own. Then, in 1991, Warren received a call informing him that one of the traders at Salomon Brothers had engaged in illegal activities to manipulate the price of Treasury bonds. This was an extremely delicate matter that the Salomon executives had covered up, leading to the fury of the Department of the Treasury and triggering investigations by the Department of Justice, the SEC, and the Federal Reserve. As a result, an announcement was made that Salomon would be prohibited from trading Treasury bonds, a move that, if not reversed with Warren's intervention, would have caused the highly leveraged legendary bank to go bankrupt. Warren Buffett once again used his reputation as an honest man to save Salomon. He reached an agreement with the Department of the Treasury, committing himself to lead the company as a demonstration of his genuine intention to clean up the company's practices. Warren held the position for 9 months, which he recalls as one of the most challenging periods of his life. However, it allowed him to prevent the loss of his investment and averted the collapse of this significant bank from triggering a systemic effect that could have caused a financial crisis.
After they first obey all rules, I then want employees to ask themselves whether they are willing to have any contemplated act appear the next day on the front page of their local paper, to be read by their spouses, children, and friends, with the reporting done by an informed and critical reporter. If they follow this test, they need not fear my other message to them. Lose money for the firm and I will be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm and I will be ruthless.
In 2000, one of the most absurd and extreme bubbles in history occurred, the dot-com bubble. The rise of the internet and technology-related companies led to absurd valuations for any business associated with technology and communications. Many of these companies were not profitable, had no capacity to generate cash flow, and in some cases, they didn't even generate revenue. However, they created a vicious circle where the higher their stock prices rose, the more attractive they became to people hoping to get rich quickly by investing in this new technology. Meanwhile, Warren Buffett was called a dinosaur, and, as in many other instances in his career, it was claimed that he had lost his touch and that at his age, he no longer understood the stock market and should retire. Warren did not yield and maintained his position. He repeatedly declared the absurdity of the market's behavior during the formation of the bubble, which, of course, was ignored at the time. Eventually, the bubble burst, and, as in many other instances, Warren was able to take advantage of low prices thanks to the liquidity he had accumulated by not getting caught up in what was popular in the market at that time. And the Nasdaq index, which has a higher concentration of technology and communication companies, reached levels above 5,000 in March 2000 and did not return to those levels until 2015, with many prominent companies of the time having disappeared and more than a decade lost for investors. In 2006, after his plans to donate his fortune had changed due to the death of his wife, Warren Buffett made an announcement that he would donate the majority of his wealth to foundations managed by his children and one of his closest friends, Bill Gates. This friendship, which was quite unusual considering the age difference when it began and Warren's aversion to technology, while Bill Gates was leading the development in this sector, was facilitated by Bill Gates' parents. Although both initially resisted the idea, they eventually became close friends. Warren, who always desired his money to be returned to society but used in an extremely efficient manner, entrusted the majority of his wealth to Gates. Through the foundation, Gates has focused on providing aid in healthcare to the poorest countries, particularly in areas such as clean water, hygiene, and vaccines. The foundation also aims to combat climate change and improve education. While the foundation doesn't bear Warren's name, it has made nearly the same contributions as Bill Gates. Despite donating his fortune in the form of Berkshire shares, Warren has remained one of the richest men in the world. Some estimates suggest that if he hadn't donated his shares, he would be the richest man in the world at present. However, Warren clearly doesn't care about holding that title. Because he lives a simple life in the same house he purchased in 1958 for $32,000. He has always avoided extravagant luxuries to the extent that the private jet he acquired in 1986 was famously known as the Indefensible because it contradicted the principles that Warren and Charlie usually preach. Nevertheless, as the chairman of one of the largest companies on the planet, it cannot be denied that it is highly practical. In 2007, the United States was experiencing an economic boom centered around the incredible performance of the real estate and financial sectors. With the S&P 500 reaching all-time highs, Warren Buffett was accumulating cash and maintaining a conservative approach amidst the market enthusiasm. However, as the issues facing the sector began to emerge, Lehman Brothers and other troubled companies sought Warren Buffett for potential rescue. Having significant liquidity put Warren in a privileged position, and he struck a deal with Goldman Sachs, acquiring perpetual preferred shares that paid a 10% annual return. He also took advantage of opportunities to make purchases in General Electric, Bank of America, Dow Chemical, Mars, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Corp., among others. The substantial profits achieved through the subsequent recovery led Warren Buffett to become the richest person in the world in 2008. In 2002, Warren Buffett made a purchase in the state-owned oil company PetroChina. This event is attributed by Charlie Munger to Warren Buffett's ability to always be learning and striving to become a better investor. Warren also invested in IBM in 2011, which marked one of his first investments in the technology sector. Despite being a recognized company with a long history of over 100 years in operation, Warren had always stayed away from the technology sector due to the difficulty of predicting its future and the possibility of rapid obsolescence for some companies overnight. Although the outcome of that investment was not favorable, it served as a learning experience for Warren, helping him overcome his aversion to the sector. In 2016, Warren made a significant investment that became the largest position in his portfolio and one of the most successful investments in his extensive career, Apple.
I bought another 123 million shares or something like that.
Why?
Because I liked it. It has a position in consumers' minds that, and the utility to them that's very, very, very useful, and it's an incredible ecosystem that they have found ways to profit more from as they've gone along.
Warren recognized the significant value of the Apple brand, which had generated tremendous customer loyalty and allowed for price increases or the halo effect while maintaining high demand. Furthermore, Warren was attracted to Apple's cash-generating ability, which enabled the company to distribute increasingly larger dividends while repurchasing its own shares. In this way, without investing more, Warren would become the owner of a progressively larger portion of Apple and receive a higher percentage of growing dividends. Warren Buffett has been against the idea that cash is king and that it should be accumulated. He argues that due to inflation, cash loses value every day, while good businesses continue to generate it.
Cash is always a bad investment. I mean, when people said cash is king a year ago, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, cash wasn't producing anything, and it was sure to go down in value over time. Anytime we have surplus cash around, I'm unhappy. I mean, I would much rather have good businesses than cash.
His statements have caused confusion throughout his career because he himself has accumulated large amounts of cash in Berkshire Hathaway. However, he clarifies that this happens when he doesn't find anything attractive to buy, not because he wants to hoard cash or because he is anticipating a crisis. In fact, he has generally been opposed to making such predictions and has become extremely cautious in interviews when asked about it. His approach, after decades, remains the same, buying good businesses at fair prices without trying to predict the market. And that's exactly what he has been doing lately. After accumulating cash for several years, he has started aggressively buying companies such as Occidental Petroleum, Chevron, Hewlett-Packard, among others. This is happening even with the looming possibility of a global economic crisis and a recession in the United States. But his confidence in the United States remains unwavering. This confidence is also reflected in his more cautious stance towards China compared to his partner Charlie Munger, who has stated that Warren is not as comfortable as he is when it comes to investing in this country.
Warren, like many other intelligent people, likes to invest where he's personally comfortable. And for some reason, I'm more comfortable with the Chinese than he is. That's a minor difference.
Although Warren Buffett does have a position in the Chinese electric car manufacturer BYD, keeping the majority of his investments and portfolio in the United States over the past decades is likely the best idea, considering the poor performance of the Chinese stock market in recent years and the negative outlook they face with their demographic crisis. At over 90 years old, Warren remains calm when expressing his opinions on new market trends, even if he is called a dinosaur or receives a great deal of insults. His stance on cryptocurrencies has garnered significant media attention in recent years. While he hasn't gone as far as Charlie Munger, who has referred to them as venereal diseases, Warren has made it clear that he would never invest in them, and that in his view the value of Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency is zero.
Bitcoin, it's ingenious, and blockchain is important, but Bitcoin has no unique value at all. It doesn't produce anything. You can stare at it all day and no little Bitcoins come out or anything like that. It's a delusion, basically.
Warren has also expressed support for institutions in his country, including the Federal Reserve, and he is one of the few people who has defended the work of Jerome Powell. He credits Powell with having saved the country from an even worse catastrophe during the pandemic, thanks to his quick and substantial action in injecting liquidity into the market. And at his age, an increasingly repeated question is who will be his successor once he can no longer continue the work. Warren has made it clear that he believes Berkshire will maintain its good results long after his death, and that the decentralized, long-term philosophy of the company and its multiple businesses and investments will enable them to continue delivering good results even when he and Charlie are no longer around. He has also made it clear that he has no intention of retiring and continues to greatly enjoy his work, to the point that his plans include managing Berkshire from beyond the grave through Ouija boards, but hopefully not for a very, very long time. If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, please share this content to reach more people who can benefit from learning about the life of this great investor and businessman. Until next time.